The lecture hall was enormous. It could hold 3,000 students, and today every seat was filled. Young officers from hundreds of different species sat in rows that stretched up toward the ceiling. Some had 4 arms, some had scales, some looked almost human. They all wore the dark blue uniform of the Galactic Defense Academy. Lieutenant Jake Morrison sat in the back row. He was human, with short dark hair and tired eyes. He looked young, maybe 28 years old, but his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much. Next to him sat Cadet Amy Porter. She was also human, fresh out of basic training. Her uniform was perfectly pressed and her eyes were bright with excitement. This was her first week at the academy and she wanted to learn everything. At the front of the hall, High Instructor Krell stood at the podium. He was a Korthan, one of the stone people. His body looked like it was carved from gray rock and he stood 3 meters tall. He had been teaching at the academy for 3,000 years. Today we discussed the Prime Wars. Krell's voice boomed through the hall. He didn't need a microphone. These wars happen every 1,000 years. The Devourers come from dark space. They consume everything, worlds, ships, people, everything. The hall was silent. Everyone knew about the Devourers. They were the nightmare that every species feared. Children across the galaxy had bad dreams about them. Krell continued. The last Prime War was 847 years ago. 17 species stood against the Devourers. He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. All 17 species were destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. Every world they had, every ship, every person. Gone. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. She had read about this in textbooks, but hearing it from someone who had lived through those times was different. No species has survived a Prime War, Krell said. His stone face showed no emotion, but his voice was heavy with ancient sadness. That is the truth you must understand. When the Devourers come, civilizations end. In the back row, Jake Morrison's lips moved. The words were so quiet that almost no one could hear them. We did. Amy's head snapped toward him. She had barely caught the whisper. What did you say? Jake's face went blank. Nothing. Just thinking out loud. But Amy had heard him. We did. What did that mean? Humans weren't even in space during the last Prime War. Everyone knew that. Humans had only made first contact with alien species 200 years ago. Krell was still talking. The next Prime War is predicted to occur in 150 years. We have time to prepare. Time to build our fleets. Time to study the old records and learn from the mistakes of those who came before us. A hand went up in the front row. It belonged to Commander Lyra Vex, a Zentari. She looked like a large insect, with 4 arms and compound eyes that glittered in the light. She was the head of tactical training at the academy. Yes, Commander Vex, Krell acknowledged her. I have reviewed the historical data, Vex said. Her voice had a clicking quality to it. The species that fell were weak. They had no discipline, no proper strategy. The Zentari were not yet spacefaring during the last Prime War. But if we had been, the outcome would have been different. Some students nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. It seemed disrespectful to call extinct species weak. Vex wasn't finished. And the younger species, like the humans, are fortunate they arrived after the real fighting was done. They have no concept of true warfare. Amy felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to say something to defend her people, but she was just a cadet. What could she say? She glanced at Jake, expecting him to be angry too. But he just sat there, his hands gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles had turned white. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Krell's stone eyes seemed to look directly at Jake for a moment. Thank you for your perspective, Commander Vex, though I would caution against judging any species too quickly. History has a way of revealing truths we did not expect. The lecture continued for another hour. Krell showed images of destroyed worlds, cities turned to ash, fleets broken and scattered. The Devourers themselves, massive creatures that looked like they were made of metal and flesh at the same time. When the lecture finally ended, students filed out of the hall in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. Amy tried to catch up with Jake, but he had already left. She found him in the corridor outside, staring at a wall display that showed the Academy's memorial garden. Lieutenant Morrison? She said carefully. He turned to look at her. Yes, Cadet Porter? In the lecture, you said something. You said we did. What did you mean? Jake's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about, but I heard you. You said humans survived the Prime War. That's impossible, Jake said. His voice was flat. Humans weren't in space back then. Everyone knows that. He walked away before she could ask anything else. Amy stood there, confused and curious. Something about the way he had said it, the way his hands had gripped that desk, the look in his eyes. It all felt wrong. That evening, Amy went to the Academy Library. It was a vast place, filled with data terminals that could access information from thousands of worlds. She started searching for information about human history. The official records were clear. Humans had developed space travel about 300 years ago. They had made first contact with the Galactic Council 200 years ago. Before that, they had been isolated on their home planet, Earth. But as Amy dug deeper, she found something strange. There were gaps in the timeline, periods where there was no information at all, and some files were marked as restricted, which was odd for basic historical data. She tried to access one of the restricted files. A message appeared on her screen. Access denied. Level 7 clearance required. Level 7 clearance was reserved for senior military commanders and council members. Why would historical records need that kind of security? Amy spent 3 more hours searching, but she found nothing useful. Just more gaps and more restricted files. Finally, frustrated and tired, she left the library. As she walked back to her quarters, she decided to take a shortcut through the memorial garden. It was a peaceful place, with plants from 100 different worlds and monuments honoring those who had died in various conflicts. She was halfway through the garden when she saw him. Jake Morrison, standing in front of a large black wall. His hand was pressed against it and his head was bowed. Amy stepped closer, staying in the shadows. She didn't want to interrupt what looked like a private moment. But she could see the wall now. It was covered in names, thousands of them, carved into the black stone. At the top of the wall was an inscription. Even from a distance, Amy could read it. For those who held the line, Earth's final defense, and below that, a date. Amy's breath caught in her throat. The date was 847 years ago. The exact same year as the last Prime War. She must have made a sound because Jake turned around. For a moment, they just looked at each other. His face was wet. He had been crying. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked quietly. "Long enough," Amy said. She walked toward the wall, her eyes scanning the inscription. This says Earth. This says 847 years ago. But that's impossible. Humans weren't in space then. Jake wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Go back to your quarters, Cadet. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns every human," Amy said. Her voice was stronger now. "What is this wall? Why is it here? Why does nobody talk about it?" Jake was silent for a long moment. Then he looked back at the wall, at all those names. Because the truth was buried. Because the galaxy decided humans weren't ready to know their own history. "What truth?" Amy demanded. Jake turned to face her fully. In the dim light of the garden, his eyes looked ancient. The truth that when High Instructor Krell said no species has survived a prime war, he was wrong. One species did survive. One species held the line when 17 others fell. One species fought the Devourers for 3 years with nothing but primitive weapons and determination. Amy felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "You mean humans?" Jake said. "We were there, we fought. And we survived. But the cost," he looked back at the wall of names, 11 billion people died. Our whole world burned. But we held the line." Amy's mind was reeling. But how? Why doesn't anyone know? Why isn't this in the history books? "Because the Galactic Council was afraid," Jake said. "They found Earth after the war. Found a species that had done what should have been impossible. A species that had become something dangerous in those 3 years of hell. So they made a choice. They sealed the records. They waited 650 years. Then they discovered humanity as a young, innocent species." "That's insane," Amy whispered. "Maybe," Jake said. "But it kept the peace. It let humanity recover. It gave us time to become something other than a war-broken species." Amy stared at him. "How do you know all this?" "These are secrets that would require the highest clearance. You're just a lieutenant unless—" Her eyes widened. "Unless you were there." Jake smiled, but it was the saddest smile Amy had ever seen. "I was 7 years old when the Devourers came. My parents put me in a cryopod. Thousands of children were frozen, hidden away, kept in sleep while the war raged. When I woke up, 300 years had passed. The galaxy had moved on, and I had to pretend to be someone I wasn't." The weeks turned into months at the academy. Every day brought new challenges. Kara learned how to fire weapons from 20 different species. She learned basic surgery for 7 different body types. She learned how to navigate without computers and how to survive in hostile environments. The training was hard, but she had expected that. What surprised her was how much time she spent in the library. While other cadets focused on physical training and combat drills, Kara spent her evenings studying the Crucible. She read every report she could find. She memorized sensor data from the void sector. She analyzed failure after failure, looking for patterns. Zix often joined her. He was studying engineering and liked to discuss technical problems. One night, 3 months into their training, he brought her a cup of hot tea. It smelled like flowers and tasted like metal. Deltharian tea. You are still reading about the Crucible, Zix observed. Yes, Kara said simply. May I ask why? I thought we talked about acceptance. We did. But I keep finding something strange in these reports. Zix sat down. Strange how? Kara turned her screen so he could see. It showed a map of the void sector. Red dots marked where cadets had encountered problems. Equipment failures, hostile drones, gravitational anomalies. There were hundreds of red dots. Look at the distribution, Kara said. These incidents are not random. They cluster in certain areas. And there are gaps. Large empty spaces where almost nothing happens. Zix studied the map. I see what you mean. But the void sector is chaotic. Sensors do not work properly there. Maybe the data is just incomplete. Maybe. Or maybe there is a structure we are not seeing. What if the void sector is not completely random? Zix looked worried. Kara, please be careful. I have seen what happens to cadets who become obsessed with solving the Crucible. It does not end well. I am not obsessed. I am just curious. Humans and their curiosity, Zix said, but he was smiling. That is what got your species into space, I suppose. Wanting to know what was beyond the next star. Something like that. Kara agreed. The next day, their class had a tactical simulation. All the cadets were divided into teams. They had to complete a mission in a virtual environment. The mission was simple. Recover cargo from a damaged station while dealing with hostile forces. Kara's team included Zix, a Krylene named Mora, and a human male named Luke. They were given 30 minutes to plan before the simulation started. Most teams chose aggressive strategies. They would attack the hostile forces, secure the area, then retrieve the cargo. It was the military way, direct, efficient, strong. Kara suggested something different. What if we do not fight them? Mora looked confused. But they will attack us, only if they detect us. The station has a damaged power grid. That means unpredictable electrical fields. We can use those fields to hide our signatures. We wait for the hostile forces to move to another section. Then we go in, get the cargo, and leave. That is cowardly, Mora said. That is smart, Luke countered. Why fight when we do not have to? They decided to try Kara's plan. When the simulation started, they moved slowly and carefully. They used the damaged station's own systems to mask their movements. The hostile forces never detected them. They retrieved the cargo in 14 minutes without firing a single shot. After the simulation, Commander Vex reviewed all the team's performances. Most teams had fought well. They showed courage and tactical skill, but many took casualties. Several teams failed to retrieve the cargo at all. When he reached Kara's team, Vex studied the recording in silence. The other cadets watched. They had all heard that Kara's team never fought anyone. This is unusual, Vex finally said. His deep voice filled the room. You achieved the objective with 0 casualties and minimal resource expenditure. But you never engaged the enemy. The mission was to recover cargo, sir, Kara said quietly, not to fight. A warrior does not hide, Throck said from across the room. A warrior faces challenges directly. Vex looked at Throck. And if facing challenges directly gets your entire crew killed, are you still a good warrior? Throck had no answer. Vex turned back to Kara. You use the environment itself as a tool. That shows understanding. However, there will be times when hiding is not possible, when you must fight. Do not forget that. Yes, sir, Kara said. After the class, Vex called Kara to his office. She had never been there before. The office was simple. A desk, a few chairs, and one wall covered with photographs. They showed Vex with different crews over the decades. So many faces, so many stories. Sit, Vex said. Kara sat. You think differently than most cadets, Vex observed. I have been watching you. You do not try to be the strongest or the fastest. You try to be the smartest. I work with what I have, sir. That is wisdom. But wisdom alone will not save you in the crucible. Kara looked at the instructor's medal hanging around Vex's neck. Up close, it looked even older than she had thought. The medal was pitted and scarred. May I ask you something, sir? You may ask. I may not answer. When you took the crucible, what was your strategy? Vex was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. I tried to fight it. Every challenge I met with strength. Every obstacle I overcame with power. For 40 hours I fought the void sector like it was an enemy to be defeated. I completed 7 objectives. I destroyed 3 hostile drones. I survived gravitational anomalies that would have killed most species. What happened after 40 hours? I ran out of ammunition. Then I ran out of fuel. Then I ran out of strength. I drifted in my pod waiting for extraction, knowing I had failed despite everything I had done. He touched the metal. But my 47% taught me something valuable. Sometimes the point is not to win. The point is to learn what winning costs. Kara thought about that. Sir, what if the cost is too high because we are fighting the wrong battle? Vex looked at her sharply. Explain. The void sector is hostile. Everyone agrees on that. But what if it is not hostile in the way we think? What if treating it as an enemy is the mistake? You think there is another approach? I think there might be. But I need more time to research. Vex studied her face. Kara met his eyes without fear. She was not challenging him. She was just stating what she believed. Humans are very young in the galaxy, Vex said finally. Your species has only been in space for a few hundred years. Most species here have been spacefaring for thousands of years. Do you not think that maybe we have already explored every possible approach? Maybe, Kara said. Or maybe being young means we see things differently. On Earth, humans were not the strongest animals. We were not the fastest or the most dangerous. But we survived because we were persistent. We did not give up. We found new ways to solve old problems. Persistence, Vex repeated. He seemed to be considering the word. That is a human trait, yes. You chase your goals until you catch them or die trying. We call it persistence hunting, sir. Our ancestors would chase prey for hours, sometimes days. The prey was faster, but humans could run longer. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion. And you think you can persistence hunt the crucible? I think I can understand it, sir. That is all I want, Vex stood up. The meeting was over. But before Kara left, he said one more thing. Be careful, Cadet Sullivan. Understanding can be dangerous. Once you see the truth of something, you cannot unsee it. And that knowledge may demand action. I will be careful, sir. That night, Kara stayed in the library until dawn. She pulled up ancient records some more than 200 years old. She found references to archaeological surveys of the void sector. Most of the data was corrupted or incomplete. But there were hints, mentions of unusual structures, energy readings that did not match any known technology. One report caught her attention. It was from the early days of the Academy, written by a survey team. They had detected what they called an artificial gravity well deep in the void sector. They recommended further investigation, but the recommendation was marked as low priority and apparently never followed up. Kara cross-referenced the coordinates of that gravity well with the map of crucible incidents. Her heart started beating faster. The gravity well sat right in the middle of one of those empty zones she had noticed. The areas where cadets rarely encountered problems. It was not much. It might mean nothing, but it was something no one else seemed to have noticed. Kara saved all the data to her personal storage. Then she leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. 3 months until the crucible. 3 months to figure out what everyone else had missed for 3 centuries. She thought about Commander Vex's warning. Understanding can be dangerous, but not understanding was even more dangerous. At least that was what Kara believed. She would keep researching. She would keep looking for patterns. And when the time came to enter the void sector, she would be ready. Not to fight it, not to conquer it, but to understand it. Because maybe, just maybe, understanding was the key that 300 years of warriors had overlooked. The news started coming in 2 days before the council meeting. A mining colony on the edge of the galaxy had gone dark. Communications were down. Ships sent to investigate found nothing but wreckage. At first, people thought it was pirates or a system failure. Then another colony went silent. Then another. Within 24 hours, 5 colonies had disappeared. The Academy's command center became a hub of frantic activity. Officers gathered around display screens watching sensor data from across the galaxy. Amy stood in the back of the room watching Jake study the reports with increasing concern. "It's the same pattern," Jake said quietly to her. "The same way it started last time. They test our defenses first. Hit the edges. See how we respond." Commander Vex was at the main console coordinating with Fleet Command. Her forearms moved rapidly across the controls. "We're sending battle groups to investigate," she announced. "Standard defensive formations. We should have eyes on the affected areas within 6 hours." Jake stepped forward. "Commander, those formations won't work." Vex's compound eyes turned to look at him. "Excuse me, Lieutenant. Your standard formations assume an enemy that fights like we do," Jake said. "Ships against ships. The Devourers don't fight that way. They swarm. They adapt. If you send your fleet in those formations, they'll be torn apart." "And how would you know that, Lieutenant?" Vex's voice was cold. "You're a tactical instructor, not a field commander. And you certainly have no experience with the Devourers." Jake's jaw tightened. Amy could see him struggling with whether to reveal the truth. Before he could respond, High Instructor Krell entered the command center. "He knows because he has fought them before," Krell said. His voice silenced the entire room. "As have I. And if you want your people to survive what is coming, Commander Vex, you will listen to him." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Vex stared at Krell in disbelief. "What are you talking about? The last Prime War was 800 years ago. No one here could have fought in it." "I was there," Krell said simply. "I watched 17 species fall, and I watched one species survive. The humans." The murmurs grew louder. Several officers started talking at once. Vex held up one hand for silence. "That's impossible. Humans weren't even in space during the last Prime War." "That is what you were told," Krell said. "The truth is different, and the truth is about to become very important. A scout ship returned 1 hour ago. It has footage. Everyone needs to see this." Krell walked to the main display and activated it. The screen filled with an image from space. At first, Amy couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. Then her mind processed it and her blood went cold. They were massive. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, moving through space like a school of fish. But these were no fish. They were nightmare creatures, part machine and part something organic. Their bodies twisted in ways that shouldn't be possible. They pulsed with a sickly light. "Devourers," someone whispered. The video showed them descending on a colony world. The settlement tried to fight back. Defensive platforms fired energy weapons. The beams hit the Devourers and seemed to just disappear into them. The creatures didn't even slow down. What happened next was too horrible to watch, but no one could look away. The Devourers landed and began consuming. Buildings, vehicles, people, everything. They moved like a wave of destruction, leaving nothing behind but bare rock. In less than an hour, a colony of 4 million people simply ceased to exist. The video ended. The command center was silent. Amy saw fear on faces that had never known fear before. These were trained military officers, veterans of countless battles. But they had never seen anything like this. "They're not supposed to return for another 150 years, Vex said. Her voice shook slightly. "Why are they here now?" "Does it matter?" Jake said. "And they're here. And they're not going to wait for us to be ready." "The Galactic Council is convening an emergency session in 2 hours," Krell announced. "All species representatives will attend. They need to decide how to respond." "What's there to decide?" an officer asked. "We fight them." "With what tactics?" Jake asked. "You saw that video. Energy weapons don't work. Standard defensive formations don't work. Everything in our military doctrine assumes an enemy that plays by the same rules we do." "The Devourers don't have rules. Then what do we do?" Vex asked. The arrogance was gone from her voice now. She sounded genuinely afraid. Jake looked at Krell, who nodded. "We learn from those who survived before," Jake said. "We learn from humanity." 2 hours later, the Galactic Council chamber was filled to capacity. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in concentric rings around the central platform. Amy had never been to a council session before. The sheer number of different beings in one place was overwhelming. She sat in the human delegation section with Jake. Around them, human diplomats and military officers looked nervous. They had been briefed on what was about to happen, and none of them were happy about it. The council speaker, a towering being made of crystalline structures, called the session to order. "We face an unprecedented crisis," the speaker announced. "The Devourers have returned ahead of schedule. Early reports indicate the swarm is 3 times larger than previous invasions. We must decide on a course of action." Multiple representatives started speaking at once, arguing for different strategies. Some wanted to evacuate the edge colonies and fortify the core worlds. Others wanted to send the entire fleet to meet the Devourers in deep space. Still others suggested trying to negotiate or find a way to communicate. Jake leaned over to Amy. "They have no idea what they're dealing with," he whispered. "You can't negotiate with the Devourers. You can't reason with them. You can only survive them." Finally, High Instructor Krell stood. His massive form commanded attention. "Honored representatives, you are debating tactics based on theory. I am here to tell you that one species in this chamber has practical experience fighting the Devourers, and it is time that experience was shared." "What species?" the speaker asked. "The humans," Krell said. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted questions and objections. The human delegation looked stunned. Even they didn't know what Krell was talking about. Commander Vex stood. "That's absurd. Humans are one of the youngest spacefaring species. They weren't present during the last Prime War." "They were present," Krell said, "and they survived. I propose unsealing the classified records from Earth to prove it." The speaker looked troubled. "Those records were sealed by Council decree. We cannot simply unseal them without majority vote." "Then I call for a vote," Krell said. The debate that followed was fierce. Many species objected to revealing the truth about humanity. Some feared humans would become arrogant and dangerous if they learned their true history. Others worried about the political implications of admitting the Council had been lying for 600 years. But the fear of the Devourers was stronger than any political concern. One by one, representatives voted to unseal the records. When the vote was complete, the speaker announced, "The motion passes. The records will be unsealed and shared with select military leadership." "No," Jake said, standing up. Everyone turned to look at him. "Not just military leadership, everyone. All humans deserve to know their own history." "That is not wise," the speaker said. "The information could cause panic and social disruption. Or it could give them the strength to face what's coming," Jake countered. "You've spent 800 years protecting humans from their own past. Maybe it's time to trust them with the truth." Amy stood as well. "I'm a cadet. I'm nobody important. But I've seen the records. I know what our ancestors did. And I can tell you that humans today are stronger than you think. We deserve to know. We need to know." More humans stood. Soon the entire human delegation was on their feet, demanding the truth be revealed. The speaker conferred with other council members. Finally, a decision was reached. "Very well. The records will be made public, but only to the human population. The rest of the galaxy will be told only what they need to know." It wasn't everything Jake had wanted, but it was a start. That night, every human in the galaxy received the same message. It contained video files, historical documents, and a simple introduction from the Galactic Council admitting they had hidden the truth. Amy watched from her quarters as the news spread across human space. Social networks exploded with reactions. Some people were angry at the deception. Others were proud of what their ancestors had done. Many were simply shocked. But underneath all the emotions, Amy saw something else emerging: determination. The same determination that had let their ancestors survive 3 years of hell. Jake came to her quarters around midnight. "Have you been watching the responses?" he asked. "Yes," Amy said. "People are handling it better than the Council expected." "That's because we're survivors," Jake said. "It's in our blood. Even the ones who don't consciously remember the war, they carry it in their genes. The instinct to fight, the will to live. You can't erase that." Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Jake's communication device beeped urgently. He answered it and his face went pale. "What is it?" Amy asked. "The Devourers," Jake said. "They've hit New Thessia. It's one of the largest colony worlds in the Outer Rim, 4 billion people. They rushed to the command center. The main display showed live. The transport ship descended through Earth's atmosphere 3 days after the attack on New Thessia." Amy pressed her face against the window, watching her homeworld grow larger below them. She had left Earth 5 years ago to join the military. She had never expected to return under these circumstances. Beside her, Jake sat in silence. He had barely spoken during the entire journey. Amy couldn't imagine what it must be like for him, returning to a world that had changed so much since he last saw it. "What was it like?" she asked quietly. "Earth during the war?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Beautiful," he finally said. "Even covered in ash and fire, it was beautiful. Because it was home, and we were willing to die for it." The ship landed at a military base in Antarctica. Amy had never been to this part of Earth before. The base looked ordinary from the outside, just a cluster of buildings on the ice. But as they were led deeper inside, descending elevator after elevator, she realized this was no ordinary facility. "This is the vault," Jake explained as they walked through metal corridors far beneath the ice, one of several hidden installations around Earth. "This is where we've been keeping the truth safe." They entered a massive chamber. Amy stopped in her tracks, staring in amazement. The room was enormous, carved out of solid rock, and it was filled with people, hundreds of men and women, all wearing military uniforms from dozens of different eras. Some looked young, others looked middle-aged, but Amy knew the truth. These were the sleepers, people who had been children during the war, frozen in time, woken gradually over the centuries. A woman approached them. She was tall and gray-haired, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore the uniform of a general, with more medals than Amy had ever seen on one person. "Jake Morrison," the woman said with a slight smile. "It's been a while." "General Rivers," Jake replied. "Good to see you." Rivers turned to Amy. "And you must be Cadet Porter. Jake has told me about you. You're the one who insisted on knowing the truth." "Yes, ma'am," Amy said. "Good," Rivers said. "We need more people willing to face uncomfortable truths. Come, there's much to show you." She led them through the vault. Amy saw rooms filled with old computers, storing data from the war. Armories containing weapons that looked ancient but well-maintained. Training facilities where sleepers were teaching younger soldiers fighting techniques that had been developed 800 years ago. "We've been preparing for this day," Rivers explained. "We knew the Devourers would return eventually. We just hoped we'd have more time." They entered a command center. Large screens showed tactical displays from across human space. Amy could see fleet movements, resource allocations, and casualty reports from the ongoing attacks. "Since the truth was revealed 3 days ago, everything has changed," Rivers said. "Recruitment stations across human space are overwhelmed. Millions of people are volunteering. Factories are retooling to produce military equipment. It's like the entire species just woke up." "They did wake up," Jake said. "They learned who they really are, what they're capable of." Rivers nodded. "But knowledge isn't enough. We need to mobilize properly. Which is why I've called you here, both of you." She activated another display. This one showed a map of the solar system, with markers indicating various locations. "During the original war, we built ships. Crude by modern standards, but effective against Devourers. We hid them after the war. Dozens of vessels, scattered throughout the asteroid belt and beyond. They've been maintained by sleepers over the centuries. They're ready to fly." Amy stared at the display. "Why keep them? Why not just build new ships with modern technology?" "Because modern ships weren't designed to fight Devourers," Rivers said. "They have energy shields that the Devourers can drain, advanced computers that can be corrupted. These old ships are simple, thick armor, kinetic weapons, nuclear warheads. The Devourers adapted to energy weapons 800 years ago, but they never fully adapted to simple, brutal firepower." Jake studied the display. "You want to bring them out of storage?" "More than that," Rivers said. "I want to tell modern humanity the complete truth. Not just about the war, but about these ships, about the tactics we developed, about everything we learned." "The Council won't like that," Amy said. "The Council is afraid," Rivers replied. "They've always been afraid of what we might become if we remembered. But I'm more afraid of what will happen if we don't remember. The Devourers are here, and we're the only species that knows how to fight them." Jake looked troubled. "Kate, I watched what the war did to our people. The brutality we embraced, the things we became capable of. Do we really want to bring that back?" Rivers met his gaze. "We don't have a choice, Jake. It's not about what we want. It's about survival. And yes, war brings out the worst in people, but it also brings out the best. Courage, sacrifice, the willingness to stand and fight when everything seems hopeless." Before Jake could respond, an alarm sounded. One of the technicians called out, "General, We're getting reports of a major information breach. Someone's leaked the location of the vault to Galactic Media. Rivers cursed. Who? Tracking it back now? It came from the Zentari Military Command. Commander Vex's office specifically. Amy felt a chill. She's trying to expose us. More than that, Rivers said, reading the incoming messages. She's leaked everything. The location of our hidden ships, the tactical data, all of it. And it's not just going to human networks. It's going everywhere. Every species in the galaxy is about to learn exactly what humanity has been hiding. Jake slammed his fist on the console. She's trying to turn the galaxy against us, make them see us as a threat. Then she's failed, Rivers said calmly. She was watching the data streams with interest. Look at the responses. Yes, some species are afraid, but more of them are asking questions. They want to know how we survived. They want to learn from us. She was right. Amy watched as messages flooded in from across the galaxy. Military commanders requesting tactical briefings, scientists wanting to study human weapons, diplomats asking for formal knowledge-sharing agreements. But more interesting were the messages coming from human space itself. Regular people, not military personnel, responding to the leaked information. And the response was not what Amy had expected. There was no panic, no fear. Instead, there was pride and determination. Message after message from humans who had just learned their complete history, saying the same thing. We did it before. We'll do it again. Commander Vex wanted to scare people, Amy said. But she gave them hope instead. Rivers smiled. Never underestimate humanity's ability to find strength in adversity. It's what we do best. Over the next few hours, the situation developed rapidly. Earth's government held an emergency session and voted to fully mobilize. The hidden ships were brought out of storage and prepared for combat. Training facilities across human space began teaching the old tactics to new recruits. Amy watched it all happen with a sense of awe. Humanity was transforming before her eyes. The peaceful, curious species that had joined the galactic community 200 years ago was revealing another face, the face of survivors, fighters, a species that had stared extinction in the face and refused to blink. What happens now? She asked Rivers. Now we show the galaxy what we're capable of, Rivers said, not to frighten them, but to give them hope, to show them that the Devourers can be fought, can be survived. She turned to Jake. I want you back in the field. We need experienced commanders who know how to fight Devourers. You've been hiding long enough. Jake nodded slowly. What about her? He gestured to Amy. Her? Rivers looked at Amy with an appraising eye. She's the bridge between the old and the new. She knows our history, but she's part of modern humanity. We need people like her to help others understand. Amy straightened. What do you need me to do? Help train the new recruits, Rivers said. You've seen the old records. You know what worked and what didn't. Share that knowledge. Make sure the next generation is ready. Over the following weeks, Earth became a hive of activity. Shipyards worked around the clock. Training centers were filled to capacity. The old warships were brought to operational status and crewed by a mix of sleepers who knew how to operate them, and modern humans eager to learn. Amy threw herself into the work. She taught classes on Devourer behavior. Based on what she had learned from the archives, she helped develop new training programs that combined old tactics with modern technology. She watched as regular civilians transformed into soldiers, driven by the knowledge of what their ancestors had accomplished. Something else was happening too, something Amy noticed in the faces around her. The humans who learned their true history didn't become more warlike or aggressive. Instead, they became more confident, more certain of themselves. They knew what they were capable of. And that knowledge gave them strength. One evening, Amy found Jake standing outside the vault, looking up at the stars. The Antarctic sky was clear and the stars were brilliant. Thinking about the past? She asked. Thinking about the future, Jake said. When I was put in cryo-sleep as a child, I thought humanity was finished. I thought we had survived but lost everything that made us who we were. But I was wrong. How so? Amy asked. We didn't lose ourselves, Jake said. We just needed time to heal. And now that we remember who we are, we're stronger than ever. Not because. The Forge system was home to 6 billion people spread across 3 habitable planets and dozens of orbital stations. It was also one of the galaxy's most important industrial centers, producing ships and weapons for the entire region. That's why the Devourers had chosen it as their next target. The combined fleet gathered in the outer reaches of the system. Amy stood on the bridge of the cruiser Horizon, watching the tactical display as more ships arrived. She had never seen so many vessels in one place. 10,000 warships from 100 different species, representing the full might of the Galactic Council. The fleet looked impressive. Sleek modern warships equipped with energy shields, plasma cannons, and quantum torpedoes. The pride of galactic military technology. Then there was the human contingent. 200 ships that looked nothing like the others. 50 were modern cruisers similar to the Horizon. But the other 150 were the old warships from the vault. They were blocky and ugly compared to the elegant alien vessels. No energy shields. No advanced weapons. Just thick armor plates and kinetic cannons. Jake commanded the old human fleet from the bridge of the Defiance, one of the original warships from 800 years ago. Amy could see his ship on the tactical display, positioned slightly apart from the main fleet. Commander Vex was in overall command of the fleet. Her voice came over the communication channel. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. The Devourers are approaching the Forge system. Estimated arrival in 30 minutes. All vessels will maintain formation and engage according to standard combat doctrine." Amy watched as the fleet arranged itself in the formation Vex had designed. It was textbook perfect based on centuries of military theory. Ships arranged in layers, with the heaviest vessels in front and support craft in the rear. Jake's voice came over the private channel he shared with Amy. "That formation won't work. The Devourers will tear through it like paper. Should we warn them?" Amy asked. "I tried," Jake said. "Vex isn't listening. She thinks her advanced tactics will make the difference. She's about to learn why 17 species fell. The Devourers arrived exactly on schedule. They came out of dark space in a massive swarm, thousands of them. The creatures were even more horrifying than the videos had shown. Massive biomechanical entities that moved with unnatural grace. The smallest were the size of fighters. The largest were as big as moons. Commander Vex gave the order to fire. The Galactic Fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy weapons lit up space. Missiles streaked toward their targets. For a moment, it looked like it was working. Devourers exploded or tumbled away damaged. Then the swarm adapted. The Devourers began absorbing the energy weapons. Their bodies rippled and changed, becoming resistant to the plasma fire. They learned to avoid the missiles, moving in patterns that made them impossible to target effectively. And then they attacked. The swarm hit the fleet like a wave. Smaller Devourers swarmed individual ships, tearing through shields and armor. Larger ones smashed through entire formations. Within minutes, the carefully planned formation was breaking apart. Amy watched in horror as ship after ship went dark on the tactical display. The Devourers were learning faster than anyone had expected. Every tactic the fleet used, they adapted to within seconds. "All ships, break formation and engage at will," Vex ordered. There was panic in her voice now, but breaking formation only made things worse. Ships scattered and the Devourers picked them off one by one. The battle was turning into a massacre. "All ships, retreat," Vex commanded. "Fall back to the inner system. We need to regroup." The fleet began to pull back, but the Devourers followed, hungry for more kills. Then Jake's voice cut through the chaos. "Human fleet, this is Morrison. Ignore the retreat order. All ships, form up on me. We're going in." "Lieutenant Morrison, stand down," Vex shouted. "That's a direct order." "Respectfully, Commander, your orders are getting people killed," Jake replied. "Human fleet, attack formation Delta. Close range engagement. Remember your training." The 200 human ships broke away from the retreating fleet. They charged directly at the Devourer swarm. It looked like suicide. Amy held her breath as she watched. The human ships weren't trying to maintain distance like the other vessels had. They were getting close. Dangerously close. The old warships opened fire with their kinetic weapons. Solid metal slugs propelled by chemical explosives slammed into the Devourers. The creatures tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. The rounds simply punched through their bodies with brutal efficiency. When the Devourers got too close, the human ships didn't retreat. They launched nuclear warheads at point-blank range, often catching themselves in the blast radius. Their thick armor protected them from the worst of it. The Devourers had no such protection. More importantly, the humans fought differently. They didn't try to destroy the Devourers from a distance. They targeted weak points, joints, sensory organs, the places where the creatures were vulnerable. Amy watched in amazement as Jake's tactics worked. The Devourers were having trouble adapting to the human strategy. They had evolved to counter advanced technology. They didn't know how to fight simple, brutal, close-range combat. "All ships, watch what the humans are doing," a voice called out. Amy recognized it as Captain Cole from the Zentari fleet. "They're making it work." "Follow their lead!" The retreating fleet began to rally. Ships turned around and charged back into the fight, this time copying the human tactics. Getting close, targeting weak points, using weapons the Devourers couldn't easily adapt to. The tide of battle slowly began to turn. On the horizon, Amy's ship took heavy damage. A Devourer broke through their defenses and boarded the vessel. Alarms blared as the creature tore through the hull. "All hands repel boarders," the captain ordered. Amy grabbed a rifle and joined the security teams rushing to intercept the Devourer. They found it in one of the cargo bays, a nightmare of metal and flesh tearing through everything in its path. The security team opened fire. Energy weapons had little effect. The creature adapted almost instantly, its body absorbing or deflecting the beams. "Switch to kinetic rounds," Amy shouted, remembering what she had learned from the old records. The team changed weapons. Solid slugs tore into the Devourer. It screamed, a sound that made Amy's bones ache, but it kept coming. Amy found herself moving without thinking. Her body seemed to know what to do, instincts rising from somewhere deep inside. She aimed for the joints, just like the old soldiers had done 800 years ago. The creature moved in patterns that felt familiar, even though she had never seen a Devourer before this moment. It was genetic memory. The trauma and learning from the original war, burned into humanity's DNA. Amy was fighting with knowledge her ancestors had paid for in blood. The Devourer fell. The security team stared at it, then at Amy. "How did you know?" one of them asked. Amy looked at her hands. They were steady. "I just knew," she said. "We all know. We just had to remember." The battle raged for 6 more hours. Ships on both sides were destroyed. The space around the forge system became a graveyard. But slowly, surely, the combined fleet was winning. The Devourers finally began to retreat. They pulled back, regrouping in the outer system. The fleet had held. Amy stood on the bridge of the damaged horizon looking at the casualty reports. 7,000 ships destroyed out of 10,000, millions of crew members dead. The human fleet had lost 80% of its ships, but the forge system was saved. 6 billion people were alive because the fleet had held the line. Commander Vex's voice came over the communication channel. She sounded tired and humbled. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. Stand down from combat status. Begin rescue operations for survivors." She paused, then added, "Lieutenant Morrison, report to Fleet Command. I need to speak with you." An hour later, Amy received a message from Jake. "I'm being promoted." Vex admitted her tactics failed. "High Instructor Krell is taking over fleet coordination, and he wants me as his tactical advisor. What we did here today, everyone saw it. They know now that humanity's experience is real." Amy replied, "What happens now?" "Now we train them," Jake sent back. "Every species in the fleet needs to learn how to fight like we do. Because that was just a scouting force. The main swarm is still coming." Amy looked at the damaged ships limping toward repair stations. She thought about the people who had died today, about the lessons purchased with their lives. The galaxy had learned something important today. The Devourers could be fought, could be hurt, could be driven back. It was a hard lesson, paid for in blood and wreckage, but it was a lesson humanity already knew. And now they would teach it to everyone else. In the ruins of the Defiance's bridge, Jake looked at the casualty reports and thought about the original war. 800 years ago, humanity had fought alone. They had survived, but barely. This time was different. This time they had allies. This time they could share what they had learned. "We held the line," he said to himself, "just like before. But this time we taught others how to hold it with us." His communication officer looked up. "Sir, we're receiving messages from across the fleet. Everyone wants to know about human combat tactics. They want to learn." Jake nodded. "Then we'll teach them. All of them. Because the real fight is still ahead of us." Outside the bridge windows, the stars shone cold and distant. 1 year passed like a dream. Kara graduated at the top of her class. She received offers from a dozen different fleet divisions. Everyone wanted the cadet who had achieved the impossible. But Kara chose something different. She joined the Exploration Division, assigned to study ancient sites across the galaxy. The ancient station in the void sector became a major research facility. Teams of scientists from every coalition species worked there now. They were discovering things that challenged everything they thought they knew about the architects. Technology, philosophy, history. It was all there, waiting to be understood. Kara visited when she could. She felt a connection to that place. She had been the first to find it, the first to understand what it meant, but she did not try to claim ownership. Knowledge belonged to everyone. The academy had changed too. The way they taught the Crucible was different now. Instructors still emphasized strength and tactics, but they also emphasized curiosity and patience. They taught cadets to ask questions, not just follow orders. The failure rate was still high, but it was getting lower. More cadets were learning to work with the environment instead of fighting it. Commander Vex had retired 6 months after the ceremony. He said it was time for new leadership, time for people who understood the changing galaxy, but he still lived at the academy serving as an advisor. Kara visited him whenever she returned. On this particular day, Kara had been invited back to give a lecture to the new class of cadets. They were just starting their training. They looked nervous and excited, the way all new cadets did. She stood in the same hall where she had received the medal. It felt different now, smaller somehow, or maybe she had just changed. The instructor's medal hung around her neck. She wore it always now. It had become part of her identity. People recognized her because of it. Some looked at her with respect, others with envy, a few with suspicion. She had learned to accept all of it. The cadets settled into their seats. Kara saw the same mix of species she had seen in her own class. Kralline, Deltharian, human, and dozens of others, all of them hoping to become officers. All of them ready to face the Crucible eventually. She walked to the podium. The room became quiet. Good morning. My name is Kara Sullivan. 1 year ago, I was sitting where you are now. Nervous, excited, wondering if I was good enough to be here. She saw several cadets nod. They understood that feeling. You have all heard about the Crucible by now. You know the statistics. You know that for almost 3 centuries, no cadet passed it. You probably also know that I was the first to achieve a perfect score. The cadets leaned forward, interested. I am not here to brag about that. I am here to tell you something important, something I wish someone had told me when I started. The Crucible is not what you think it is. She paused, letting that sink in. For 300 years, everyone believed the Crucible was designed to be impossible, a test to teach humility through failure. But that was wrong. The Crucible was designed by an ancient civilization called the Architects. They created it to find people who could think differently, people who could look at a challenge and ask why instead of just asking how. One cadet raised her hand. She was human, with dark hair and determined eyes. Yes, Kara said. How did you figure that out? What made you approach it differently? Good question. I spent months in the library, reading every report I could find. I noticed patterns that others had missed. Empty zones in the void sector where incidents rarely happened. I found old survey reports that mentioned unusual structures. And I asked myself a simple question. What if the void sector is not random? What if there is a reason for everything? Another cadet spoke up. This one was Kralline with scales the color of bronze. But how did you have time to do all that research? We have so much training already. Combat drills, tactical studies. How did you fit it in? Kara smiled. I did not sleep much, and I made choices about where to focus my energy. I was never going to be the strongest fighter. I am human. Most species here are physically stronger than I am, so I decided to focus on what I could be good at. Understanding, planning, patience. She walked out from behind the podium, getting closer to the cadets. Here is what I want you to understand. Each of you has unique strengths. Maybe you come from a species that can see in different light spectrums. Maybe your people are natural navigators. Maybe you have cultural knowledge that others lack. Do not try to be good at everything. Figure out what makes you unique and develop that. A Deltharian cadet raised his hand. What about teamwork? We are taught that officers need to be well-rounded. Being well-rounded is important. You need basic competence in many areas. But true excellence comes from specialization. And teamwork means combining different specialists, not making everyone the same. The coalition is strong because we are diverse. Use that diversity. Learn from each other. She returned to the podium and looked out at all the young faces. When you face the Crucible, remember this. It is not testing your ability to fight. It is testing your ability to think. Do not go in there ready to conquer. Go in there ready to learn. Pay attention. Watch for patterns. Ask why things happen the way they do. And most importantly, do not assume that the way things have always been done is the only way to do them. The human cadet who had asked the first question spoke again. But what if we still fail? Even with all that preparation, what if it is still too hard? Kara thought about that. It was a fair question, then you fail. And that is okay. Failure is not the end of the world. Commander Vex achieved 47%, and he became one of the most respected officers in Coalition history. What matters is not whether you succeed perfectly. What matters is whether you learn something, whether you push yourself, whether you try approaches others have not considered. She touched the medal around her neck. This medal is not just about passing the crucible. It is about questioning assumptions, about having the courage to think differently, even when everyone tells you there is only one way. That is what I want you to take from today. Not that you need to be like me, but that you need to be authentically yourselves and bring your unique perspectives to every challenge. The lecture continued for another hour. Kara answered questions about her experience in the Void sector. She described finding the ancient station. She talked about the choices she made and the lessons she learned. The cadets listened intently, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions. When it was over, several cadets approached her. They wanted advice. They wanted encouragement. She gave what she could, remembering what it felt like to be in their position. Later, she found Commander Vex in his usual spot. He had a small garden on one of the observation decks. It was filled with plants from different worlds. He said it reminded him that diversity created beauty. "How was the lecture?" Vex asked. He was watering a plant with purple leaves. "Good, I think." The cadets asked intelligent questions. They always do when they are genuinely curious. You inspire that in them. Kara sat on a bench nearby. "Do you ever miss wearing the medal?" Vex smiled. "Sometimes. But it belongs with you now. You earned it in a way I never did. I came close to understanding the crucible. You actually understood it. You taught me more than you know. If you had not shared your experience, if you had not been open to new ideas, I might have approached it the same way everyone else did. Perhaps. Or perhaps you would have found your own way regardless. That is the human trait, is it not? Persistence in the face of impossible odds." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the plants grow slowly under artificial light. "What will you do next?" Vex asked. "After your current assignment ends?" "Keep exploring. There are more architect sites out there, more mysteries to solve. The galaxy is huge and we have barely scratched the surface. And you will approach each one with the same curiosity you brought to the crucible. That is the plan." Vex nodded approvingly. "Good. The Coalition needs more people like you, people who ask questions, people who refuse to accept that impossible means impossible." As the artificial sun began to set on the observation deck, Kara thought about her journey. From freight hauler to cadet to officer, from nobody to the person wearing the instructor's medal. It had been unexpected. It had been challenging. It had changed her life completely. But the most important thing she had learned was simple. Impossible was not a fact. It was just a word people used when they had not found the answer yet. The crucible had taught 300 years of cadets about limits. But it was never meant to teach that lesson. It was meant to teach about potential, about possibility, about the power of asking better questions. Kara had been the first to learn that lesson. But she would not be the last. The Academy was changing. The Coalition was changing. And humanity, young and curious and persistent, was helping to drive that change. She stood up, ready to return to her ship. There were new assignments waiting. New mysteries to explore. New challenges to face. Thank you, Commander Vex, for everything. Thank you, Lieutenant Sullivan, for showing an old warrior that there is always more to learn. As Kara walked away, the instructor's medal caught the light. It was scarred and old, marked by centuries of history, but it was also a symbol of hope. A reminder that every generation could surpass the one before. That progress was possible. That impossible was just